look at all things money matters now. The JSE All Share index is trading slightly higher as optimism around China's recovery lifted resource-linked sectors and tech stocks. Meanwhile, caution prevailed due to ongoing fears of prolonged monetary tightening by the Federal Reserve and mounting geopolitical tensions. Trader and founder of Herenya Capital is Petri Redelinghuys. He joins us for the latest market moves. Thank you for your patience with us, Petri. So let's start with an idea of how local trade is faring so far. A flat start to the week for the rand.
Good afternoon, and man, it's not a problem. I just wish the floodgates of volume traded through the JSE would open. Right, it's been a very frustrating time. But yeah, so far our market is actually holding up pretty well. I mean, we're up around 1/3%, given quite a negative backdrop. How we ended the week last week. International markets not really performing that well, although it is generally expected to be a bit more of a quiet session today. The US, of course, is closed. They have a public holiday, so no big volume coming in this afternoon. So markets are kind of muted and just grinding sideways, if you will. I mean, our market generally is up by about 1/3%. Most of the action coming from the resources space, as we're looking forward to some data and results and company results and things coming from China later this week. Gold miners under a little bit of pressure, particularly Sibanye. They've, only down around 1/3%, not even, but there's a bit of bad news around that. And Anglo-American Platinum, I think, at least within the top 40, is the one that is leading the way down, or is the most under pressure on the back of a set of disappointing results. Otherwise, it's a relatively quiet day, and I think we'll probably see a muted start to the week. Coming into this week, as we've mentioned on our weekly game plan post that we do on our website every Sunday, we are expecting this week to be a little bit more bearish than we have seen in the last couple of weeks. The market has been overall, at least in the US as well as locally, has been consolidating sometimes, or for some time now. For the last 2 to 3 weeks, we've seen trend lines, short-term bullish trend lines being broken down. So we're expecting the market to be somewhat softer and a bit more volatile this week, although we're off to a very slow start, of course, as the US is closed today, and that is affecting really all of us to the sense where we just sit around and wait to see what the US will do on Tuesday.
Well, we don't have to wait long to see what our Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, will do. He's expected to announce his budget on Wednesday. What are you looking forward to the most?
Oh, well, I would like to see budget allocations to Eskom and how the state of emergency, or whatever it is that we're in, disaster, how that's going to translate into spending, right? Where are they going to get, essentially, what are they going to cut in order to spend on Eskom? And look, the reality of the situation here is Eskom has been saying that it is under capacity for over 20 years. Nobody really took it seriously, and then eventually load shedding started, and they've been saying the same story for a very long time. We know that there's a big corruption problem that needs to be stamped out, and some work is being done towards that. However, we still have a shortfall of funding, and the reason electricity prices keep going up is because, Eskom's not really making enough money to operate, nor, essentially maintain its infrastructure. So I think that is going to be where most of the attention is going to be. There's obviously other things that people will be watching out for, potentially increases in tax and that kind of stuff. Although I think the sort of headline thing at this stage is really just, how are we going to pay for Eskom? How much money are we going to give it? And where is that money going to come from? And I suppose we'll find out on Wednesday. And that, I think, depending on, there are terrible ideas like go to IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and get a loan, for example. That would be very bad news for us. There are other ways of funding that. For example, something that would be really nice to see, or potentially not, Eskom funding, but government has been talking about small business support, particularly for companies affected by Eskom. We all know that we're under a large amount of pressure from inflation. So what would be really nice to see is maybe cutting some of the fuel levies that government puts on. We know 50% of the fuel price at the pump, maybe just over, is essentially tax. If we can cut those fuel levies for a couple of months, or just reduce them across the board for a long period of time, let's say we cut them by 50% or something like that, that would bring a huge amount of relief to the general consumer, to the economy, to small business. A lot of companies are losing a lot of money, burning petrol and diesel to continue to operate. Obviously, we know that those protect jobs. So it would make a lot of sense to cut that fuel levy in order to support small business. That would probably be one of the most direct ways that they could do that. Also, we'd like to see some guidance on, they did say that there will be, support and relief for small business with regards to load shedding. During COVID, we saw a TERS program, which helped, small businesses pay salaries and that type of stuff. What are we going to see from government? Are they going to give grants to small businesses to install solar capacity, perhaps, battery storage and that kind of thing? So that type of project would be quite nice to see if they have anything, up their sleeve for that. Because again, there is a lot of money that will need to be spent in order to do something like that. So what is the plan? How are they going to fund it? I think that's really going to be the focus, at least our focus, for the budget coming up on Wednesday.
Yep. Stillwater is said to be readying itself for battle with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy after being denied a mining right for the exploration project it acquired 5 years ago. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I suppose never a dull moment. They bought Lonmin a while ago, and they bought some of their operations and mines and stuff. And part of that transaction was, mine on it, but included mining right as well as exploration rights and all that kind of stuff. And it was obviously part of the deal and part of the transaction that they'd done. So they essentially paid for it under the assumption that, government will honor this, the commitment that they'd given to Lonmin to be allowed to mine on the piece of property. Now they are having a bit of an issue where, in its new form, under its new owner, that same property and mining right, government is not allowing them to go ahead. So we know that government is obviously very involved with these deals. We always see the Competition Tribunal and all sorts of other government watchdogs be involved with big transactions like this. And there's normally a huge amount of negotiation that goes into protecting jobs, for example, with government. They'll allow the transaction to take place, if you undertake not to fire anybody for a couple of years. So there's a lot of sort of requirements that government imposes on mining companies or big companies to do these types of mergers and acquisitions. And one of the things that now seems that was part of this transaction was this mining right that they essentially bought over from Lonmin, that government is now saying, sorry, you can't go out and mine there. Which, it puts Sibanye in a very difficult position. They've paid for an asset that they can't use, number one. And, the government didn't really keep their end of the bargain, right? Why aren't they allowed to mine that if the company that they bought essentially had the right to? So, so there's going to be essentially a bit of a court battle around that. So I'll be quite interested to see how that works out. Look, Sibanye has been under a little bit of pressure also, just sort of speaking off the cuff here. It's been under a little bit of pressure of late. And, they've done a whole bunch of interesting, exciting new things, like setting up a lithium mine and all that kind of stuff is really great. But it has been under a bit of pressure, and we haven't seen commodity prices. Palladium also has been kind of a silent killer for some time. It's been ticking lower and lower and lower for a very, for about a year or two now. And, that as well as the platinum price has been under quite a bit of pressure. And Sibanye obviously makes a lot of money from those sort of PGM, platinum group metals, which includes those two, of course. So they have been under quite a bit of pressure as is. Now there's a lot of capex that has to be done also with this lithium mining operation and now litigation against the government. So it's been a tough time for Sibanye. Our base expectation is that we probably see the share price fall another 10 or 15% from here on the back of this type of negative news cycle. However, it still does make, if it were to come down 10 or 15%, it probably would be a very attractive entry point for longer-term investors.
Let's take a look at this, Petri, very quickly for us. Blue Label Telecom says it expects to report a more than 90% drop in interim earnings.
Yeah, so they actually didn't do too badly. I think they earned 545 million in revenues. Can't remember the core number. I think it was 135 million rand profit, so it wasn't too bad. However, there was a change in the way that they can account for the losses essentially that Cell C is making. And the debt that Cell C has. So it's a number of around 1.1 billion rand that has to be written through the income statement on their on their financials, which takes their healthy profit that they'd made for the year and it's absolutely just decimates it. So they go into a loss position where they lose somewhere between 90 and 112 or 115%, reduction in headline earnings per share. So it is an accounting change that took place that unfortunately, has a negative impact. But I think that shows the real trouble that Cell C, had found itself in, right? I mean, it's very nice to try and compete against the likes of Vodacom and Telecom, but it is an expensive game, and Blue Label Telecoms are currently sitting with a bit of a lemon, and they need to figure out what they're going to do with Cell C and how they're either going to turn the company around or liquidate it. But that loss essentially, that Cell C loss is essentially being written through to their to their income statement, and it goes in their financials. So they had a really, really bad year. But at least, another way of seeing it is at least now they've taken the bitter pill. You can avoid this, financial / accounting loss for only so long that it could be deferred. At some point you have to account for it, and that point seems to be now. Share price really kind of, taking it okay. The news came out on Friday. Obviously, it didn't respond very well to that. It was trading sort of upwards of 5.60 on on Wednesday. By Friday, it came down a bit. It's currently trading at 5.14. So, in percentage terms, that's a big move. But the reality of the fact is here, it's still sort of floating around the 5 to 6 rand mark. So, I'd say the share's taken it pretty well. And hopefully from here, things will improve for them as, if they've taken a punch on the chin now, hopefully it's out the system and they can move forward.
Lemons to lemonade. Thank you very much, Petri Redelinghuys, founder and trader at Herenya Capital. So here was what's happening when we return.